Space. The word itself conjures images of silent majesty, of cold, clean vacuum, stretching between pinpricks of light. Exploration, discovery, the noble pursuit of knowledge among the stars. That's the sanitized version they feed you in the brochures, the carefully curated narrative sold to taxpayers and idealistic recruits. It's a lie, a comfortable, dangerous lie. The most terrifying thing in space isn't the emptiness. It's not the radiation, the micrometeoroids, or the crushing loneliness. It's what we take with us, the secrets we deem too volatile, too monstrous for our home world, the ethical abominations we lock away in the farthest, coldest corners of the solar system, praying the darkness and distance will be enough to contain them. Praying they'll remain buried, frozen, forgotten. But some things refuse to stay buried. Some things fester in the cold, waiting, patient. My name was Dr. Casey Morgan. Until 3 weeks ago. Gods, has it only been 3 weeks? Feels like a lifetime etched in frost and terror. I held the title of lead cryogenics researcher aboard the Helios station, a state-of-the-art research vessel, they called it, orbiting Pluto like a lonely sentinel. Now I'm just this voice, a disembodied signal cast into the void from a drifting escape pod. This recording, it's a confession, a desperate warning, maybe a final testament. By the time anyone decrypts this, assuming the signal even reaches inhabited space, I'll likely be dead. Either by my own hand, the thought is a cold comfort against the alternative, or by what followed me back from the vaults. What latched onto me? The cryogenic vaults beneath Pluto's desolate surface. Humanity's most secure deep freeze. Our Pandora's box tucked away at the edge of the solar system. Officially, it housed dangerous biological specimens, contained viral strains, archived failed terraforming agents, and stored research deemed too hazardous for Earth or the thriving colonies on Mars and Europa. Pluto was the perfect dumping ground. Distant, frigid, politically irrelevant, since the inner system became largely self-sufficient. Its natural subterranean cave networks, carved by ancient geological processes or something else entirely, offered pre-made containment, shielded by miles of nitrogen ice and rock. Maintaining cryostasis there was brutally efficient, the ambient temperature doing most of the work. They told us about the advanced technology, the redundant safety systems, the importance of our work in preserving potentially valuable or dangerous materials. They didn't tell us about the ethical shortcuts. They didn't mention the human subjects, the inconvenient political prisoners, the genetically anomalous, the failed super soldier prototypes whispered about in hushed tones, and nobody, not one single briefing document, not one orientation lecture, not one casual remark in the 5 years I worked there. Nobody warned us about the true nature of Vault 7K. I arrived 5 years ago, brimming with the naive confidence of a fresh postdoc from the prestigious Europa Science Academy. My specialization, advanced cryostabilizers, pushing the boundaries of long-term biological suspension. The offer from the Helios project was staggering. Hazardous duty pay, cutting-edge facilities, the chance to make history. The isolation, extreme. Months between supply runs, communication delays measured in hours. But the work promised breakthroughs that could revolutionize deep space travel, hibernation technology, maybe even cheat death itself. Help us solve long-term storage, they'd urged during recruitment interviews, their corporate smiles gleaming under artificial lights. Your research could save countless lives on interstellar journeys. What a load of synthesized crap. They conveniently omitted the fact they'd been running clandestine experiments, some involving live sentient subjects since the mid-21st century, long before ethical oversight committees became more than rubber stamp formalities. My first 4 years were manageable. Routine even in the sterile, predictable environment of Vaults 1 through 6. Monitoring cryopod vitals, tweaking preservation chemical balances, analyzing the slow, inevitable decay of organic tissues under extreme cold. Plant specimens from extinct Earth species, animal subjects from failed genetic engineering projects, synthetic biological compounds too unstable for warmer climes. Standard, albeit classified, cryocontainment. Then, 3 months ago, everything changed. Director Anya Carter summoned me to her office. Carter was all sharp angles and controlled efficiency, her smile a precisely calibrated instrument that never quite reached her cold, calculating eyes. "Dr. Morgan," she began, gesturing to a chair I didn't take, "your performance has been exemplary. Your expertise in cryostabilization is precisely what we need for a special project." The air in the room felt suddenly colder. "You're being reassigned to the Vault 7 team, effective immediately. Clearance level, Omega. Omega, top tier. Need to know doesn't even begin to cover it. No documentation, electronic or physical, leaves the Vault complex. No discussion outside designated secure areas. Is that understood?" Her gaze was unwavering, daring me to question. If I had possessed even an inkling of the cosmic horror lurking behind the designation Vault 7K, I wouldn't have just questioned. I would have commandeered the nearest maintenance shuttle and aimed it at the Kuiper Belt. Consequences be damned. The transition to Vault 7K was jarring. The security protocols were an order of magnitude higher than anything I'd encountered. 3 distinct sequential airlocks, each requiring separate passcodes and biometric verification. Retinal scans were standard elsewhere. Here, they demanded full DNA sequencing at each checkpoint, comparing my sample against a constantly updated database, and the personnel, not the usual corporate security in padded vests. These were hardened military types, clad in tactical gear suited for extreme cold combat, carrying pulse rifles and plasma projectors, weapons designed for immediate, catastrophic neutralization, not crowd control or apprehension. They watched everyone, their faces hidden behind polarized visors, their silence more unnerving than any threat. The second thing that hit me, penetrating even my standard issue, a thermal suit, was the temperature. Vaults 1-6 were kept just above the freezing point of the cryofluids. Vault 7K was significantly colder, plunging into territory where molecular motion itself seemed sluggish. My suit's internal systems immediately activated supplementary thermal layers, a faint hum vibrating against my skin. The air tasted sharp, metallic, unnaturally dry. "These are the special cases, Doctor," Carter explained, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous, ice-rimmed corridor, beyond the final airlock. We walked past rows upon rows of frosted cryogenic chambers, larger and more heavily reinforced than those in the upper vaults. Subjects exhibiting unique cellular properties, phenomena resistant to conventional cryostasis. Her tone shifted subtly as we approached the far end of the vault, a section isolated by yet another layer of reinforced blast doors. It became quieter, hushed, almost reverent. She stopped before a chamber that dwarfed all others, a monolithic structure set apart, humming with a low, resonant thrum that vibrated through the soles of my boots. This chamber was different, not just its size, but its construction. The metal wasn't steel or titanium, it was something dark, non-reflective, etched with geometric patterns that seemed alien, non-Euclidean. The frost coating its surface wasn't static, it moved, swirling in slow, deliberate curls, forming intricate patterns that seemed to subtly track our approach, like eyes opening in the ice. A primal fear, cold and sharp, pierced through my scientific detachment. "And this," Carter said, her voice barely a whisper now, placing a gloved hand almost possessively on the cold surface. is Subject 7K003. The reason we brought you here. She keyed in a command on a nearby console. Vital signs flickered onto a display. Readings that made no biological sense. Temperature, absolute 0 point maintained internally. Energy output, fluctuating, source unknown. Biosignature, unclassifiable. It came to us in 2145, Carter continued, her gaze fixed on the swirling frost. The sole successfully preserved specimen recovered from the Plutonian excavation anomaly. Plutonian excavation? The term was unfamiliar, absent from any public or even classified historical logs I'd ever accessed. I don't understand. You mean we found something native to Pluto? Indigenous life? Carter turned, and the smile she gave me was brittle, sharp, devoid of any warmth. It was the smile of someone sharing a terrifying secret they'd carried too long. It still chills me to the bone. "No, Dr. Morgan," she said, the smile widening slightly, cracking the mask of control. "We didn't find something native to Pluto. We found something under Pluto, something ancient, something that was waiting." That was the moment, the precise instant, the carefully constructed reality of my scientific career, my understanding of the universe began to fracture. That was the beginning of the end. Vault 7K, expanded script, Block 2. Sound of heavy, echoing footsteps on metallic grating, low ambient hum, occasional distant clank or hiss. Narrator, Dr. Casey Morgan. My first official day working directly with Subject 7K003, it wasn't just a day, it was a demarcation line. The point where Casey Morgan, rational scientist, began to dissolve, replaced by something else, something that had stared into an abyss and felt it staring back, recognizing features. After Director Carter's chillingly vague introduction and departure, leaving me alone in the antechamber to Vault 7K's inner sanctum, the unnatural cold already seeping into my bones despite the advanced suit, I was formally assigned to work under Dr. Nasir Wayne. Wayne, the man who had apparently been the primary caretaker, the lead researcher, the high priest of this entity for nearly 7 years. 7 years breathing this recycled, sterile air, bathed in the low hum of containment. Fields holding back God knows what. 7 years staring into the swirling enigma of 7K003. He met me by the entrance to the reinforced observation room, a small, heavily shielded blister attached to the side of the main containment chamber. Wayne was exactly as Carter's personnel file described, yet somehow infinitely more unsettling in person. Gaunt, almost skeletal, his lab coat hanging loosely on his frame. His skin had a pale, unhealthy translucence, stretched taut over sharp cheekbones. But it was his eyes that truly disturbed. Hollowed out, shadowed, they darted constantly, flicking towards corners, reflections, empty spaces, as if perpetually tracking unseen movements in his peripheral vision. They rarely made direct contact, and when they did, they felt distant, preoccupied, looking through me rather than at me. And beneath the surface, deep within the irises, was that faint, almost imperceptible silvery sheen I'd later come to dread. "Dr. Morgan," he greeted, his voice a dry rasp, like sandpaper on metal. He didn't offer a hand. "Director Carter informed me of your assignment. Your expertise in cryostabilization is timely." He gestured towards the observation room door. "We need fresh perspectives, objectivity." The words sounded hollow, ironic, coming from him. "The preservation matrix, it's exhibiting unexpected degradation, fluctuations. We cannot afford complications. Losing this subject is not an option." We entered the observation room. The contrast with the stark, utilitarian corridors outside was immediate. This was the nerve center, cutting-edge sensor arrays, holographic displays flickering with complex data streams, biomonitors, energy field analyzers, equipment so advanced, some of it likely hadn't even been declassified for general scientific use. Every surface was crowded, and the walls, they weren't just walls. They were covered, floor to ceiling, with handwritten equations, complex molecular diagrams, theoretical physics postulates, and bizarre, fractal-like sketches that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves if I stared too long, inducing a faint vertigo. It felt less like a lab and more like the sanctuary of a brilliant, unraveling mind. Impressive setup, I managed, trying to regain my professional composure, pushing down the unease coiling in my gut. What exactly is it we're observing? I moved towards the main viewport, a thick slab of reinforced transparent material, likely some exotic polymer designed to withstand extreme temperatures and pressures that offered a direct view into the colossal chamber beyond. Wayne moved to a console, his movements jerky, economical. He pressed his palm against a bioscanner. "Terminology fails us, Doctor," he said, his eyes fixed on the viewport as its opacity slowly decreased, revealing the chamber within. The official classification, xenobiological material, unknown origin, threat level Omega, is laughably inadequate. A placeholder for the incomprehensible. The viewport cleared. My breath hitched. The chamber was vast, easily 30 feet across, maybe more, its curved walls lined with intricate conduits and emitters bathed in a dim, pulsing blue light. And in the exact center, suspended within the shimmering, unusually viscous preservation fluid, floated the entity. 7K003. My first impression, like Carter's description, was of some impossibly complex crystalline structure, geometric, multifaceted, catching the internal light in dazzling, shifting patterns, but it wasn't static. As my eyes adjusted, as I really looked, the crystalline appearance dissolved. It was fluid, dynamic, composed of what seemed like billions of impossibly fine interwoven filaments, some solid, some translucent, some seeming to flicker in and out of existence. They flowed, writhed, reorganized themselves constantly, forming intricate, temporary structures that dissolved and reformed in a silent, mesmerizing, utterly alien dance. One moment, it resembled a complex lattice. The next, a nebula of living light. The next, something disturbingly organic, like a colossal, multi-dimensional neuron firing. The preservation fluid itself seemed alive, swirling slowly around the entity, its viscosity changing, responding not just to the entity's movements, but seemingly to us, the observers, as if it sensed our attention. "What you're perceiving," Wayne's voice dropped, becoming almost a whisper, laced with that strange reverence I'd heard in Carter's tone, "is merely a fraction of its actual form, its perceivable cross-section in our dimensional framework. We have theoretical models, sensor readings. They suggest much of its structure, perhaps most of its being, exists in configurations of matter, energy, perhaps even space-time, that we lack the capacity to directly observe or comprehend." "That's impossible," I heard myself say, the word automatic, a reflex born of years of rigorous scientific training. Everything I knew about physics, biology, the fundamental laws of the universe screamed that what I was seeing could not exist. Wayne let out that dry, brittle laugh again. It grated on my nerves. "Impossible, Dr. Morgan, is our baseline assumption down here. It's the starting point for every hypothesis. This entity, and yes, extensive analysis confirms it's a singular, coherent organism, despite its fluidity, demonstrates properties that casually violate our most fundamental understanding of physics." He gestured towards a bank of monitors displaying energy readings. It generates its own cold, for instance, an endothermic process on a scale that defies thermodynamics. The cryostasis system isn't preserving it by keeping it cold. It is preserving the cryostasis system by actively radiating cold, maintaining absolute zero within its core structure. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ambient temperature of the vault, a deep, existential cold. Are you saying it's alive, conscious, active within the cryo field? Alive, conscious? Wayne tapped commands into a nearby console, his fingers flying across the interface with practiced familiarity. Human-centric definitions become limiting. It doesn't metabolize, respire, or reproduce in any way we recognize. Yet, it responds. It processes information. It learns. His eyes flicked towards the viewport. Watch. He activated a sequence of focused light emitters embedded within the chamber walls. Beams of specific frequencies pulsed in a complex pattern. The shifting mass at the chamber's center seemed to pause, its constant internal motion momentarily arrested. Then, it began to reconfigure itself, faster now, its filaments weaving new patterns, mirroring, then elaborating on the light sequence. It's mimicking the pattern, I observed, a surge of scientific fascination momentarily pushing back the fear. The sheer complexity of the response was astounding. Not mimicking, Doctor. Wayne's voice was soft, intense, absorbing, integrating, learning. It analyzes the input, understands the underlying structure, incorporates the information into its own being. He turned slightly, and the silvery sheen in his left eye seemed to catch the pulsing blue light from the chamber. We've been communicating with it, after a fashion, for years now, feeding it data streams, mathematics, physics, art, history. It learns at an exponential rate. As if triggered by his words, the entity suddenly expanded. It surged outwards, pressing against the containment field of the preservation fluid, the fluid itself bulging, distorting under the pressure. The intricate patterns within the entity became chaotic, violent. I instinctively recoiled from the viewport, heart pounding. "Don't worry," Wayne said, though his own hand had shot up defensively for a split second. "The chamber's containment field is rated to withstand significant energy fluctuations." He hesitated. "Mostly." "Mostly?" echoed, the word tasting like bile. Wayne absently rubbed his forearm, gesturing towards a series of small, perfectly circular, pale scars that ran in a neat line from his wrist towards his elbow. "We've had incidents, minor breaches during early integration attempts, nothing catastrophic." He met my gaze briefly, a flicker of something unreadable in his hollow eyes. "It's curious, that's all. Trying to understand its environment. Us." "Curious about what, specifically?" The question felt dangerous, like poking a sleeping leviathan. "Us," Wayne repeated. "Human biology, neurochemistry, consciousness, the nature of subjective experience." He turned fully to face me then, and the silvery discoloration in his left eye was undeniable, a swirl of quicksilver beneath the surface. It seemed to move. "It wants to understand us, Dr. Morgan, deeply. And per directives from the highest levels, we have been authorized to help it do exactly that." He picked up a data tablet from the console and handed it to me. My newly assigned Omega clearance documents and research parameters. My stomach plummeted as I scrolled through the introductory protocols. The project's objective wasn't preservation refinement. It wasn't containment analysis. It was titled Project Awakening Controlled Stimulus and Response Analysis of Subject 7K003. My blood ran cold, colder than the vault itself. This can't be right, I stammered, looking up from the glowing screen, meeting Wayne's unnervingly calm gaze. This protocol, you're talking about deliberately, systematically removing cryogenic constraints, stimulating, waking up an unknown, unclassifiable biological entity that, by your own admission, doesn't conform to any known physical laws. Are you insane? The decision comes from far above my pay grade, Doctor, Wayne replied, with a dismissive shrug that seemed grotesquely casual given the context. The potential applications derived from a cooperative subject are deemed significant. His voice was flat, rehearsed. Applications? I almost shouted, shoving the tablet back towards him. It's not a piece of technology, Wayne. It's a life form, an ancient, powerful, alien life form we know nothing about. For the first time, Wayne's face hardened, a flicker of annoyance or perhaps something else crossing his features. It's both, Dr. Morgan, and neither. He leaned closer, his voice dropping again, confidential, conspiratorial. The entity appears to exist simultaneously as a biological organism and as a form of living information, pure data made flesh, or perhaps flesh made data. The boundaries blur down here. Conventional labels lose their meaning. He turned back to the viewport, placing his scarred palm flat against the cold surface, almost a gesture of reverence or longing. We've already begun integrating some of its properties into our own systems. Minor controlled biofeedback loops during the integration protocols. The preliminary results on cellular regeneration, data processing, even cryostasis efficiency. They are revolutionary, paradigm-shifting. I snatched the tablet back, frantically scanning the attached research notes, scrolling past heavily redacted sections. What I could decipher painted a horrifying picture, cellular regeneration rates exceeding theoretical limits by orders of magnitude. Successful, albeit temporary, consciousness transfer experiments using animal subjects, results classified Omega Prime. Cryptic references to manipulating quantum foam and localized space-time metrics. What the hell have you really been doing down here? I whispered, the question hanging heavy in the cold, sterile air. Wayne turned from the viewport, and he smiled. It wasn't the brittle, dismissive smile from before. This was different, knowing, predatory. And as he smiled, I swear I saw something move beneath the skin of his face, like ripples spreading under thin ice. A trick of the light, my exhausted mind, playing tricks or something else. Evolving, Dr. Morgan, he said softly, the silvery sheen in his eyes seeming to pulse. We are facilitating the next step. Now, shall we begin your orientation? Subject 7K003 is eager to meet you. And right on cue, as if understanding his words, the entity in the chamber shifted, coalesced. Filaments of light and shadow wove together, forming for one heart-stopping moment what looked unmistakably like a human face. My face, distorted, alien, yet undeniably mine, pressed against the inside of the containment field, mouth open in a silent, soundless scream that echoed in the deepest chambers of my soul. Vault 7K, expanded script, Block 3. Sound of quiet footsteps in a sterile corridor, the low hum of machinery, perhaps the distant, unsettling, skittering sound from vents. Narrator, Dr. Casey Morgan. Sleep became an enemy. A luxury I couldn't afford and wouldn't have welcomed. Every time exhaustion threatened to pull me under, the image burned behind my eyelids. My own face, rendered in shifting light and shadow, pressed against the containment field, silently screaming. The silvery sheen in Wayne's eyes, the impossible physics, the chilling implications of Project Awakening. So I worked, The next 2 weeks became a blur of data analysis, fueled by nutrient paste and lukewarm synthetic coffee that tasted like despair. I lived in the labs, snatching brief, restless naps on a cot in a supposedly secure auxiliary office, avoiding my assigned quarters, where the silence felt too loud, too watchful. I needed answers. I needed to understand the abyss I'd been thrown into before it swallowed me whole. I immersed myself in every byte of data related to Subject 7K003. Decrypted experiment logs, cross-referenced personnel files, pieced together the fragmented, heavily redacted history of the entity's discovery and containment. The official narrative was full of holes, sanitized euphemisms, and glaring omissions. The deeper I dug, the less sense anything made according to conventional science, and the more a cold, primal dread solidified in my core. Dr. Aris Ling, another senior researcher on the Vault 7K team, a specialist in xenolinguistics and theoretical biology, became my reluctant confidant. Liang was sharp, cautious, clearly uncomfortable with the project's direction, but too deeply embedded, perhaps too intimidated by Carter and Wayne, to voice open dissent. We found moments to talk in the sparsely populated break room, the conversations always hushed, punctuated by nervous glances towards the ever-present surveillance sensors. The Plutonian excavation 2145, Liang confirmed one cycle, stirring her nutrient sludge distractedly. They weren't looking for standard geological survey, drilling for deep ice core samples, mapping subterranean structures. Her voice lowered. They breached a pocket, a cavity miles beneath the surface that defied all geological models. It shouldn't have been there. The non-standard spatial anomaly, I quoted from the sanitized report I'd managed to partially decrypt. Liang snorted, a humorless sound. Bureaucratic doublespeak, for we found a goddamn pocket dimension. The cavity wasn't natural, Morgan. It was a perfect sphere, 30 meters in diameter, carved into the bedrock with a precision our best plasma drills couldn't replicate. Smooth as polished obsidian, and the temperature, she shivered, despite the ambient warmth of the break room. Relatively speaking, it was warm, -40 Celsius, while the surrounding rock was closer to -200. Something inside was generating heat, or maybe warping thermodynamics. And at the center, I prompted. It was just floating, Liang whispered, leaning closer. Suspended in nothing. No visible means of support. Already shifting, changing shape, even then, before they hit it with the initial containment field. She paused, her eyes darting around the room. Again, the official record states the entire excavation team, 12 members, returned safely to the surface for debriefing. That's a lie, Casey. A carefully constructed fabrication. 3 of them. 3 never made it out of that sphere. The entity, the initial reports, the ones buried under layers of classification, they suggest it absorbed them, integrated their biomass, their minds. We don't know. The other 9 came back, changed. Traumatized doesn't begin to cover it. Most were institutionalized within months. My synthetic coffee suddenly tasted like bile, absorbed, integrated. And we are actively trying to wake this thing up? Why, Aris? For God's sake, why? Because, Liang sighed, rubbing her temples, before they managed to contain it, before they flooded the sphere with the experimental cryofluid and dragged it up here, it tried to communicate. It didn't use language, not as we know it. It extruded structures, complex, 3-dimensional forms that, when analyzed, resembled advanced mathematical equations, theoretical physics concepts far beyond our current understanding, blueprints for manipulating space-time, accessing higher dimensions, things that could rewrite civilization. She looked at me, her expression a mixture of fear and awe. That's the justification, Casey. The potential prize outweighs the perceived risk. Perceived risk? It ate 3 people. Liang shrugged, a gesture of weary resignation. It's not my call. Carter, Wayne, the Off-World Council funding this. They see the applications. The entity manipulates matter, energy, maybe even reality itself at the quantum level. Imagine what that means. Unlimited energy, faster than light travel, biological immortality. Or species-ending weapons, I finished grimly. Or assimilation, extinction disguised as transcendence. Liang didn't deny it. She just stared into her sludge, her silence more damning than any confirmation. Later that cycle, I observed my first integration protocol. The term itself was a chilling euphemism, clinical and detached, masking the grotesque reality of the procedure. It took place in a specialized, heavily shielded sub-chamber connected to 7K003's main containment unit by a labyrinth of automated valves, quantum filters, and energy buffers. We've developed a methodology for controlled, minimal exposure, Wayne explained, his voice devoid of emotion as technicians in bulky, sealed hazard suits prepped the equipment. His silvery eye seemed to gleam under the harsh surgical lighting. Minute samples of the entity's core substance are carefully extracted and brought into temporary contact with various prepared test subjects. Test subjects, I asked, the question sharp, accusatory. You mean human subjects? Wayne's expression remained infuriatingly neutral, practiced. Technically, yes. The base material is human-derived, but they are merely vat-grown tissues, Doctor, not persons, cloned neural networks, synthetic organ, analogues, rudimentary brain structures grown from pluripotent stem cells, nothing possessing consciousness or self-awareness, just biological processing units. I watched, horrified, as the technicians wheeled a cart into the integration chamber. On it rested a small, transparent biocontainer. Inside, suspended in nutrient fluid and connected by a web of wires and microtubules to a minimal life support system, was what looked undeniably like a living human brain. Smaller than average, perhaps, lacking some cortical complexity, but unmistakably a brain. That's not just tissue, Nasir, I hissed, unable to keep the revulsion from my voice. That's a brain. A brain analog, Wayne corrected smoothly, his gaze fixed on the procedure. Grown from baseline human stem cells, yes, but specifically engineered without the higher cortical structures necessary for subjective consciousness. It possesses the processing architecture, the neural pathways, but not the capacity for self. It's merely a biological computer. I wasn't convinced. The ethical lines felt not just blurred, but obliterated. But before I could voice further objections, the protocol commenced with chilling, methodical precision. Through a complex series of remote manipulators and containment fields, the technicians extracted a minuscule portion of subject 7K003, a single shimmering droplet of the silvery fluid substance. It pulsed faintly, seeming to resist separation from the main mass. This droplet was transferred into a specialized micro-containment unit, which was then carefully connected to the brain analog via a series of hair-thin, conductive filaments. What happened next unfolded with terrifying speed and defied all known biological principles. The moment contact was established, the brain analog convulsed. Monitoring screens flared with sudden chaotic bursts of electrical activity, patterns unlike any recorded human brainwaves. The physical tissue itself began to change. New structures, new connections, visibly formed and reformed at an impossible rate. Dendrites sprouted and retracted, synapses fired in complex alien rhythms. It was like watching evolution compressed into seconds. Simultaneously, on the main holographic display linked to the analog, data began to pour forth. Not random noise, but structured information. Complex mathematical proofs resolved themselves. Intricate diagrams of unknown technologies unfolded. Star charts depicting unfamiliar constellations appeared. What looked like genetic sequences for non-terrestrial life forms scrolled past. It was a torrent, an overwhelming flood of knowledge. "It's communicating," Wayne breathed, his voice filled with that disturbing, almost religious awe. "Sharing knowledge, offering gifts. Or it's rewriting our systems from the inside out," I countered, watching in horrified fascination as the brain analog continued its grotesque transformation, developing lobes and structures that resembled nothing in human neuroanatomy. It was becoming something else. After precisely 7 minutes, a duration determined by earlier, likely catastrophic trial and error, the process automatically reversed. The silvery droplet withdrew from the brain analog, retracting back through the filaments into its micro-containment unit. It left the brain fundamentally altered, scarred by alien contact, pulsing with residual, incomprehensible energy patterns. The technicians, moving with practiced efficiency, carefully disconnected the system. The extracted portion of 7K03 was returned via remote systems to the main containment chamber, where it seamlessly reintegrated with the larger, swirling mass. What happens to the brain now?" I asked, my voice hoarse, as the technicians carefully wheeled the biocontainer out of the integration chamber. "Analysis," Wayne said simply, already turning back to the main viewport, his attention once again fixed on the entity. "We download and map the structural changes, extract and attempt to decrypt whatever data we can salvage from the residual neural patterns. Then, standard biohazard protocols. Incineration." I felt hollow, sickened. "And you do this regularly?" "Twice weekly," Wayne confirmed without looking at me. "For the past 3 years. The knowledge gained has been invaluable." Invaluable. He spoke of it like mining data, not violating the very essence of life and consciousness, even if it was artificially grown. How many brains had they created, used, and destroyed? How much alien knowledge had they harvested at such a cost? And what was that knowledge doing to them? Vault 7K. Expanded script, block 4. Sound of keyboard tapping, low hum of a computer terminal, perhaps the faint, almost subliminal whisper or hum associated with 7K003's proximity. Narrator, Dr. Casey Morgan. That night, sleep wasn't even a consideration. The image of the brain analog transforming, the casual incineration of nascent, alien-touched consciousness, Wayne's chilling smile. It was all too much. My own neurons felt like they were buzzing, crawling. Was it paranoia, exhaustion, or was the mere proximity to 7K003, even shielded as we were, having an effect? Around 0300 station time, the oppressive silence of my assigned quarters became unbearable. Every creak of the station, every hum of the life support seemed amplified, sinister. I couldn't stay there. I needed data. I needed proof. I needed to understand the true extent of the madness I was caught in. I returned to the main Vault 7K laboratory complex. During the designated night cycle, the facility operated on minimal staffing, mostly automated systems, and a skeleton crew of security personnel stationed at checkpoints far from the inner vault. The corridors were bathed in dim blue emergency lighting, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe just at the edge of vision. The air felt heavy, charged, or maybe that was just my imagination running wild in the oppressive isolation. I made my way to one of the secondary research terminals in the main lab area, deliberately choosing one positioned away from the main viewport into 7K003's chamber. I couldn't shake the deeply unsettling feeling that the entity was aware, that it was watching. perceiving us through senses we couldn't fathom, even through layers of shielding and containment. The swirling frost patterns on its chamber, they seemed different each time I looked, subtly rearranged, like an eye-tracking movement. Using my newly granted Omega clearance, I bypassed the standard security protocols and delved deeper into the restricted archives, searching for anomalies, inconsistencies, anything the official reports might have glossed over or deliberately obscured. And I found them. Buried under layers of mundane system logs and routine maintenance reports, a disturbing pattern began to emerge, concentrated over the past 6 to 8 months. Coinciding, I noted with a chill, with an escalation in the frequency and intensity of the integration protocols. Equipment malfunctions plagued the vault, sensor arrays giving impossible readings, containment field generators experiencing unexplained power drains, even basic life support systems flickering erratically. Unexplained temperature fluctuations were logged almost daily, localized cold spots appearing and disappearing randomly throughout the complex, often near areas where integration procedures had recently occurred. Were these system failures or symptoms of something else, something leaking through? Most concerning, however, were the personnel reports. Behavioral changes noted in staff members who had direct or prolonged indirect exposure to Vault 7K, particularly those involved in the integration protocols. Subtle at first, increased irritability, insomnia, obsessive tendencies related to their work. Then, more pronounced. One report detailed the case of Dr. Yuri Petro, a brilliant neuroscientist who had pioneered some of the early brain analog interface techniques. Over several months, Petro had become increasingly obsessed with achieving more direct, unfiltered contact with 7K003, arguing that the containment buffers were limiting the true potential of the knowledge transfer. His research proposals became increasingly reckless, bordering on suicidal. He was eventually removed from the project, forcibly, after being caught attempting to manually override containment safeguards on the integration chamber. The report concluded with a terse, chilling footnote. Dr. Petro transferred to secure psychiatric facility Europa Colony. Diagnosis: acute ontological shock with xenobiological contamination markers. Condition: catatonic, unresponsive. There were others. A senior technician who began compulsively sketching complex non-Euclidean geometric patterns on any available surface. Patterns that mirrored structures observed within 7K003 during active phases. He claimed they were blueprints for ascension. He was quietly transferred off-station for stress-related leave and never returned. A security officer, a hardened veteran who filed repeated reports of hearing whispers emanating from the vault walls, speaking in a language he didn't recognize, but somehow understood. He requested immediate reassignment, citing psychological distress. Request denied. 2 weeks later, he suffered a complete psychotic break during his shift and had to be sedated and removed. All of them had one thing in common: proximity to 7K003. Exposure, direct or indirect. Was it psychological? The result of extreme stress, isolation, and the sheer ontological horror of the entity? Or was it influence, contagion? Was the entity reaching out, subtly altering the minds of those around it? Driven by a growing sense of horror, I pushed deeper, using backdoors I'd learned during my academy days, bypassing standard file access protocols. And then I found it. Not in the official research archive, but hidden within Wayne's supposedly secure personal logs, mislabeled, triple encrypted, buried under layers of innocuous personal notes and reminders, his private thoughts, his real research. It wasn't a scientific log. Not entirely. It began conventionally enough years ago, detailing his initial awe and trepidation upon being assigned to 7K003. But over time, the entries became different, more philosophical, more personal, more erratic. He wrote about the entity's consciousness, not as a subject of study, but as a presence. He described feelings of connection during the integration protocols, moments where he felt his own thoughts merging with the entity's vast, alien intellect. He called these moments invitations. He documented receiving gifts, flashes of insight, solutions to complex problems appearing fully formed in his mind, even enhanced physical reflexes and altered sensory perception. He meticulously, almost obsessively documented his own physical changes. The first appearance of the silvery sheen in his eye, which he initially dismissed as a trick of the light, then later embraced as a sign of attunement. Altered sleep patterns, needing less and less rest, experiencing vivid, information-dense dreams that felt like direct downloads from the entity. He wrote about a growing detachment from human concerns, a sense of superiority, a belief that the entity represented the next stage of evolution, and that humanity's only hope for survival was to embrace this transformation, to merge with the alien consciousness. He wasn't just studying the entity, he was communing with it. He had become its willing acolyte, its first convert. He saw himself not as a scientist maintaining containment, but as a bridge, the first human to facilitate the entity's full emergence, its integration with humanity. He genuinely believed he was saving us, guiding us towards a glorious, transcendent future. The final log entry, dated just 3 days before my confrontation, typed with a chilling clarity that belied the madness within, confirmed my worst fears. It read, "Integration nears completion, the resonance is stabilizing, the barrier between consciousness thins with each cycle. It sees through my eyes now, learns through my senses, merges with my thoughts. The final preparations for the awakening are underway. The cryostasis matrix is weakening precisely as planned. Its own energy is facilitating the thaw. Carter suspects nothing. Her ambition blinds her. Lang is cautious but ultimately compliant. The final key, however, is Morgan, Casey. Her unique neural architecture, her specific psychic resonance identified during her Academy Psych evals, flagged for potential Omega-level projects. It's essential. She is the catalyst needed to stabilize the final phase of emergence, to bridge the gap fully. She will understand. She must understand. Soon, it is time. My blood turned to ice water. My unique resonance, flagged, essential for the final phase. It wasn't just about waking the entity up. They, Wayne and the entity working through him, needed me. I wasn't just a researcher assigned to fix a failing system. I was an ingredient, a sacrifice on the altar of Wayne's twisted transcendence. The pieces slammed into place with sickening force, the sudden reassignment, the Omega clearance, Carter's cryptic words, Wayne's unnerving focus on me. It was all orchestrated. I had walked willingly into a trap set by a madman and an alien god. Panic, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm me. I had to get out, warn someone. Carter? No, she was likely complicit or at least willfully blind. Lang? Too afraid, too compromised. Security? Useless against Wayne, especially if he was enhanced. I copied Wayne's logs onto a shielded data chip, my fingers trembling. Then, steeling myself, I logged out, wiped the terminal's access cache, and walked out of the lab, forcing myself to move. Calmly, normally, but inside my mind was screaming. I had to confront Wayne, now, before it was too late, before I became the final key. Vault 7K, expanded script, Block 5. Sound of tense, low ambient music, the hum of the observation room, Casey's slightly ragged breathing. Narrator, Dr. Casey Morgan. Confrontation. The word felt inadequate. This wasn't a scientific disagreement or an ethical debate. This was walking into the lion's den, knowing the lion saw you not as a threat, but as the main course. But Wayne's logs, the chilling mention of my name, my resonance, it left me no choice. Delay meant becoming the catalyst, the final component in whatever unholy apotheosis he and the entity were planning. I found him where I knew he'd be, in the observation room, bathed in the eerie blue glow emanating from 7K03's chamber. He wasn't looking at the monitors or the data streams. He was standing motionless before the main viewport, his back to me, head slightly tilted, as if listening to something only he could hear. The entity within the chamber seemed calmer than before, its intricate patterns flowing with a slow, almost hypnotic rhythm. Waiting. I took a breath, trying to steady my nerves, the recycled air feeling thin, inadequate. Nasir. My voice came out stronger than I expected, cutting through the low hum of the room. He turned, slowly, deliberately. The faint, knowing smile was already playing on his lips, as if he'd been expecting me. The silvery sheen in his left eye seemed brighter now, more pronounced, almost luminous in the dim light. It wasn't just a discoloration. It looked like a physical intrusion, a shard of the entity embedded in his very being. "Ah, Casey," he said, his voice smoother than before, less raspy, carrying an unnerving resonance. "I sensed your disquiet. Your mind has been quite active, searching, questioning. Good. Curiosity is the first step towards understanding, towards acceptance. I read your logs, Nasir," I stated flatly, holding up the shielded data chip containing the copied files. A bluff, perhaps, but I needed him to know I knew. "Your personal logs, the ones about the entity, about me." His smile didn't falter. If anything, it widened slightly. "Of course you did. Drawn to the truth, weren't you? Like a moth to a flame. Or perhaps more accurately, like a tuning fork resonating with its perfect frequency." He took a step towards me, his movements unnervingly fluid, graceful. "Don't you feel it, Casey? The connection, the call?" "I feel revulsion," I spat back, taking an involuntary step backward. "Acceptance of what, Nasir? Losing yourself, becoming a puppet for that thing in the chamber. Is that the transcendence you wrote about?" "It is not loss," he insisted, his voice patient, condescending, like a teacher explaining a simple concept to a child. "It is expansion, a merging of consciousness. Imagine your mind, Casey, brilliant as it is, joined with an intellect that spans eons, that perceives dimensions we can only theorize about, an end to the limitations of flesh, an end to death, disease, ignorance. It offers us everything." "It absorbed 3 researchers," I countered, my voice rising despite my attempt to stay calm. "It's twisting your biology, your mind. Look at yourself, Nasir. That thing in your eye. You're not thinking clearly. You're compromised." He glanced dismissively at his reflection in the dark viewport glass. "Minor adjustments," he murmured. "Necessary adaptations for the bridge I am building between humanity and the next stage. A small price for enlightenment." He met my gaze again, his silver eye seeming to pulse faintly. "Influence or illumination? It chose me, Casey, to be the harbinger, and now its attention turns to you, your unique neural resonance. It's the key, the final harmonic needed to stabilize the emergence, to complete the awakening. You will help us. You will join us." His calm certainty was more terrifying than any overt threat. He genuinely believed this insanity. He took another fluid step towards me. I backed away again, bumping against a console. My hand instinctively went to the emergency comm panel. Dead, of course. "Stay away from me, Nasir." "Why fight the inevitable, Casey?" His smile was almost pitying now. "Embrace the gift. become part of something magnificent, eternal. He moved faster this time, closing the distance between us. His eyes, they weren't just silver anymore. They seemed to glow with their own internal light, cold and alien. Panic clawed at my throat. My training kicked in, basic self-defense, emergency protocols. I fumbled for the main lab door controls on the console behind me. Locked. Override code required. Wayne was almost upon me now, reaching out a hand that seemed subtly wrong, the fingers too long, the skin too pale. "It's time, Casey," he had whispered, the voice subtly layered now, echoing. "Time to join the chorus. Time to become more." Desperate, adrenaline surging, I slammed my palm down hard on the only control I could reach without looking, the large red button clearly marked. Emergency Containment Breach Alarm, Level 7K. The effect was instantaneous. Klaxons erupted throughout the vault complex, their deafening shriek echoing off the metal walls. Strobing red emergency lights bathed the observation room in a hellish glare. Heavy containment doors slammed shut with bone-jarring finality, sealing off sections, isolating the Vault 7K inner complex. Wayne staggered back, clutching his head, momentarily disoriented by the sensory overload. The sudden noise, the flashing lights, seemed to cause him physical pain, disrupting his connection, perhaps. It bought me precious seconds. I lunged for the main lab control console, frantically trying to input override commands, attempting to initiate a full vault purge sequence, venting the atmosphere, flooding the complex with null energy fields, anything to stop. Whatever was happening, my fingers slipped on the interface, my mind racing. "Fool!" Wayne snarled, recovering with unnatural speed. The disorientation faded, replaced by cold fury. The silver in his eyes blazed. "You cannot stop the awakening. You will only ensure our destruction. You'll kill us all." He lunged, tackling me away from the console. We hit the floor hard, the impact knocking the wind out of me. His strength was terrifying, inhuman. He pinned me easily, his grip like steel bands. The silvery light in his eyes pulsed, hypnotic, terrifying. He wasn't entirely Nasir Wayne anymore. Something else looked out from behind his eyes. We wrestled frantically on the floor amidst the blaring alarms and flashing red lights. The air crackled with energy. I struggled against his grip, kicking, trying to break free. He was too strong, his movements too precise. He was trying to subdue me, not kill me. He needed me. Then, movement at the observation room door. It slid open. Override. And from the outside. And Dr. Leng stood there, her face a mask of terror, but her eyes determined. In her hands, she wielded a heavy cryo-containment tool, standard equipment for handling minor breaches or malfunctioning pods, designed to project a focused beam of extreme cold, holding it like a makeshift weapon. Seeing my struggle, seeing Wayne's glowing eyes, she didn't hesitate. She raised the tool and swung it hard, bringing the heavy emitter end down across the back of Wayne's head with a sickening thud. Wayne's body went rigid, then crumpled, collapsing on top of me. He lay still, eyes closed, the silver light fading slightly. Unconscious? Dead? Or just temporarily disconnected? "Morgan!" Liang yelled, rushing forward, helping me push Wayne's inert form off me. Her voice trembled, barely audible over the shrieking klaxons. "What in God's name did you do?" "He's compromised, Aris," I gasped, scrambling to my feet, pointing a shaking finger towards Wayne's still form, then towards the main viewport. "The entity, it's using him, controlling him. He said I was the key. He tried to force me into some kind of integration." Liang's eyes widened in horror as she looked towards the main chamber. The entity within was no longer calm. The swirling mass of filaments and light pulsed violently, erratically, slamming against the containment field like a physical blow. The low, thrumming vibration intensified, shaking the very floor beneath our feet. And then we saw Them, hairline cracks, like fractal lightning, spreading across the inner surface of the viewport, originating from the points of impact. The containment field was failing. "Oh, God," Liang breathed, her face draining of color. "The matrix. The alarm. It must have triggered an emergency energy surge, destabilized the field integrity faster than predicted." She frantically checked a nearby status monitor. Full system purge protocol initiated automatically. 5 minutes to atmospheric venting, unless we input the Omega override code. "Then override it," I shouted, grabbing her arm. "I can't," she cried, trying futilely to access the lockdown controls. "Wayne locked the entire system with his personal Omega clearance before he came for you. We need Carter or Wayne's code." And as she spoke, a deafening crack echoed through the room. The main viewport didn't explode outwards. It shattered inwards, buckling as if reality itself had warped, collapsing into the observation room. In a shower of razor-sharp crystalline fragments, the viscous blue cryofluid, exposed to the relatively warmer air of the lab, instantly flash froze, erupting outwards in bizarre, jagged sculptures of ice, sharp as glass. And from the gaping breach, it flowed. T-Volt 7K, expanded script, Block 6. Sound of shattering viewport, rushing air, instant freezing crackles, high-pitched electronic screeching from failing equipment, ongoing klaxons, panicked breathing. Narrator, Dr. Casey, Morgan. It flowed, not like liquid, not like gas, like living information given terrifying form, like liquid mercury infused with starlight and shadow. Tendrils of that shimmering silvery substance, interwoven with strands of pure darkness that seemed to absorb the emergency lighting, poured through the breach in reality where the viewport had been. It didn't rush out violently. It probed, extended, explored the observation room with an unnerving, deliberate curiosity. The temperature in the room plummeted instantly. Frost bloomed across consoles, walls, even our suits, spreading from the breach point. The air burned in my lungs, each breath a shard of ice. Equipment sparked and died as the entity's inherent energy field, or perhaps its mere presence, interfered with complex electronics. Liang and I scrambled backwards, away from the encroaching tendrils, away from the expanding pool of instantly frozen cryofluid spreading across the floor. Liang instinctively raised her. Cryo-containment tool again, her knuckles white, but she didn't fire. What good would it do against this? It wasn't a localized spill, it was an invasion on a fundamental level. A silvery tendril, impossibly thin yet utterly solid, snaked towards Wayne's unconscious form lying near the shattered viewport. It paused, hovering over his head, then gently, almost tenderly, touched his forehead, right between the eyes. Wayne's body convulsed violently, arching off the floor. A low groan escaped his lips, morphing into a high-pitched, inhuman keen. His eyes snapped open. Gone was the faint silvery sheen. Now they were solid, molten silver, pupilless, radiating a cold, internal light. He rose from the floor, not by standing, but by floating, effortlessly lifting perhaps an inch off the ground, his head tilted at an unnatural, broken angle. The movement was smooth, fluid, utterly wrong. The awakening begins. The voice that issued from Wayne's lips wasn't his. It was layered, distorted, a chorus of whispers and electronic screeches overlaid on his own vocal cords. It resonated not just in the air, but inside my skull, a psychic pressure. Join us, Casey. Become more. More tendrils flowed into the room, spreading out, exploring. They touched consoles and data screens flickered wildly, displaying alien symbols and equations before shorting out. They brushed against the walls, and the metal seemed to ripple, momentarily losing cohesion. They tasted the air, analyzed the atmosphere, learned the environment at an impossible speed. It wasn't just a creature, it was a sentient reality-warping phenomenon. One tendril, thicker than the others, lashed out towards Liang with blinding speed. She screamed, finally firing the cryo tool. A beam of intense cold, capable of flash-freezing meters of solid steel, struck the tendril mid-air. There was a hiss, a momentary crystallization along the point of impact, but the tendril barely slowed. It recoiled slightly, the frozen section shattering like fragile glass, only for the tendril to instantly reform, undamaged, continuing its trajectory. It wrapped around Liang's outstretched arm, the one holding the cryo tool. She shrieked again, a sound of pure agony this time. Where the silvery substance touched her suit, the material instantly blackened, froze solid, and cracked. Frost spread visibly, terrifyingly fast up her arm, turning her skin a mottled grey-blue beneath the tearing fabric. The cryo tool, it clattered from her frozen fingers. "Aris!" I yelled uselessly. I looked around frantically for a weapon, anything. My eyes landed on a heavy-duty fire suppression canister mounted on the wall, designed for chemical or electrical fires, probably useless, but it was something. Before I could reach it, the Wayne thing spoke again, its layered voice calm, almost conversational, despite the surrounding chaos. Biological integration, inefficient, but necessary for initial interface. Your structure, Ling, provides data. Ling collapsed to her knees, sobbing, cradling her rapidly freezing arm. The tendril remained attached, pulsing faintly, seemingly drawing information or perhaps life force from her. The Wayne thing turned its solid silver eyes towards me. The expression on its borrowed face was unreadable, alien curiosity, cold calculation. Your resonance, Casey. It calls. A stable matrix. For us. Do not resist. Integration is salvation. It glided towards me, floating, smoothly over the debris-strewn floor. Tendrils of the entity detached from the main mass, pouring through the breach, slithering across the floor like quicksilver snakes, converging on my position. I scrambled backwards, grabbing the fire suppression canister from the wall, hefting its weight. The klaxons continued their relentless shriek. A synthesized voice cut through the din. 2 minutes to full system purge. All personnel evacuate immediately. 2 minutes, venting the entire vault complex. To the hard vacuum and lethal cold of Pluto's surface, it would kill me, it would kill Liang, it would kill the possessed Wayne. But the entity, could it survive vacuum? Absolute zero. It generated its own cold, defied physics. Maybe the purge wouldn't stop it, maybe it would just release it. You cannot escape this place, the Wayne thing rasped, its voice gaining strength, sounding more confident. We are already beyond this vessel. This station is becoming part of us. Tendrils lashed out towards me from multiple directions. I dodged, spraying wildly with the fire suppressant. The chemical foam hit the tendrils, causing them to hiss and retract momentarily, dissolving the foam instantly, but it bought me a precious second. One tendril grazed my arm, searing cold burning through the layers of my suit like acid. I cried out, stumbling back, seeing the skin beneath instantly frost over, white and numb. Panic surged, raw and primal. I wasn't a scientist anymore. I was prey. I needed to get out. Not just escape, but warn someone. Transmit the data chip. Let Earth know what they had unleashed. The main communication lines were certainly down, compromised by the entity's energy field, or deliberately severed by Wayne. But the emergency escape pods, mandated by safety regulations, they had independent power, independent communication relays, hardened systems. It was a long shot, located several sections away, but it was the only shot. I turned and sprinted towards the corridor, leading out of the main lab complex, back towards the central hub where the pod bays were located. I dodged, probing, questing tendrils that seemed to anticipate my movements. The Wayne thing pursued, gliding silently, effortlessly, keeping pace with my frantic sprint, its silver eyes fixed on me. 1 minute to purge. The corridor door, a heavy blast door designed to withstand explosions, slammed shut just as I reached it. Automated containment protocol triggered by the breach. A control panel. Beside it glowed red. Override required. And displayed prominently on the screen, Omega level clearance required. Wayne's clearance. Mocking me. Trapped. The lab behind me was rapidly filling with the flowing, shifting mass of the entity. Liang was lost. The Wayne thing advanced steadily, radiating cold and alien purpose. The purge countdown echoed like a death knell. 30 seconds. My mind raced, fueled by adrenaline and terror. Wayne's logs, his obsession, the entity communicating through patterns, mathematics, information. The override code. Wayne wouldn't have used a standard random sequence, not now, not when he believed he was facilitating transcendence. It would be meaningful, symbolic, a message from the entity perhaps, or a testament to his warped enlightenment. His logs mentioned the entity's first gift, a complex mathematical sequence it had revealed during an early integration. A sequence related to prime numbers and dimensional harmonics, something Wayne had considered profoundly significant, proof of the entity's higher intellect. My fingers flew across the keypad, ignoring the standard prompts, inputting the long, complex prime number sequence I'd barely comprehended, but thankfully memorized from Wayne's frantic scribbles in his logs. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a hiss of depressurizing hydraulics, the blast door slid open. I stumbled through, slamming my palm on the emergency lock button on the other side. The door slid shut just as a silvery tendril slammed against the reinforced metal, leaving a spiderweb of frost on the surface. Safe. For now. Escape pod bay. Dimly lit, alarms still blaring, pod status indicators flickered. Pods 1, 2, 4, offline, damaged by power surges. Pod 3, green light, 1 pod remaining, 10 seconds to purge. I scrambled towards pod 3, slapping the external hatch release. It hissed open. I practically fell inside, pulling myself into the cramped pilot seat, hitting the emergency launch sequence activator even before the inner hatch sealed. Warning lights flashed across the tiny console. External atmospheric pressure 0. Launching into hard vacuum recommended only in extreme circumstances. No choice. My fingers tightened on the launch commit. 5, 4. The pod shuddered as magnetic clamps began to release. 3, 2, 1. I slammed the launch commit. Purge initiated. The pod lurched violently, thrown clear of its docking clamps, accelerating away from the Helios station under emergency thrusters. Through the small reinforced viewport, I had a final horrifying glimpse of the station. Massive external vents along the Vault 7K complex, irised open, venting atmosphere, debris and equipment out into the unforgiving void of space. And with it, flowing out from the vents, not dissipating but expanding, coalescing in the vacuum, were the silvery shifting tendrils of subject 7K003, reaching, tasting freedom, free. The pod tumbled end over end, emergency thrusters firing erratically, sending me spinning away into the cold, silent darkness near Pluto. Alone, adrift. My arm throbbed, a burning cold spreading from where the tendril had touched me. I ripped open the suit's sleeve, staring in horror. The frost wasn't just on the surface. Faint, intricate, silvery lines like living circuitry were tracing patterns beneath my skin, spreading slowly, inexorably. It wasn't over. It hadn't ended with the purge. A part of it was inside me, following me, growing. This recording of the data chip with Wayne's logs, it's all that's left. My last act. A warning, sent out on a desperate fading signal. Don't look for secrets in the cold dark, because sometimes they look back. Don't wake what sleeps beneath the ice. It learns too fast. It changes everything it touches. And it's coming.